Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alisha Canales-McGuire. Alisha was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alisha learned the value of hard work from a young age. Starting to work at just 5 years old, she often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alisha, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alisha lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradle. Alisha lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alisha to watch her kids during her absence. Alisha was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alisha lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alisha's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alisha and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alisha's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alisha lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alisha's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, the officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "really," and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alisha. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the three other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alisha's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alisha. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alisha to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, his sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alisha was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alisha died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alisha's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tul ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tul ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alisha's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person, who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alisha, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alisha, not Alisha herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alisha's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably two people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alisha's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alisha's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alisha was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jadon boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly, claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jadon Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records, showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alisha. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alisha. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alisha opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1st, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1st, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alisha Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Varka Rani. In 2012, Jasveer Ram Ginde, a 29-year-old banker, lived in Wawal town, England, while his parents resided in India. They would frequently call him, urging him to get married since he had reached a marriageable age. Jasveer, however, would consistently ignore their requests until he finally relented in 2012. His parents were overjoyed by his decision and immediately started searching for a suitable bride for their son. In October 2012, Jasveer visited India and reunited with his parents after many years. They showed him photographs of several potential brides, but he didn't find any of them appealing. A relative then suggested a girl named Varka Rani, whom they had discovered on a matrimonial website. Jasveer's parents were impressed by her profile and showed it to their son. Jasveer was immediately drawn to her picture, and his parents subsequently contacted Varka's parents to arrange a meeting between the two families. During this meeting, Varka and Jasveer were introduced to each other, and after conversing for a while, they found themselves compatible. Talks of their marriage began, and a wedding date was eventually set. Let's take a step back and learn about Varka's background. Varka Rani, who lived in Marbagh Singh Nagar, Punjab, was 24 years old when Jasveer, 29, came into her life. After graduating, Varka pursued a degree in information technology and had a passion for studying, earning degrees in 4 different courses at a young age. She was the apple of her family's eye. As she approached a suitable age for marriage, her family, with her consent, created a profile for her on a matrimonial site. Through this platform, Varka found her life partner, and Jasveer planned to take her to England after their wedding. Varka's family was overjoyed, knowing that her academic achievements would make it easy for her to find a job in England as well. On March 28, 2013, Jasveer and Varka tied the knot in a traditional Indian wedding, which was a lavish affair with around 700 guests in attendance. However, shortly after the celebration, Jasveer had to return to England, while Varka's visa was still pending approval. During this period, Varka applied for an England visa, but Jasveer had already reached England. Meanwhile, Varka was eagerly waiting for her visa in India. Eventually, her wait ended, and in July, she booked a ticket to join her husband in England. Finally, on August 10, 2013, Varka arrived in England, reuniting with Jasveer. In the vicinity of Jasveer's house, there was a crematorium where the dead were cremated. The pungent smell of burning human flesh would often spread through the air when someone's funeral rites were performed, causing discomfort to Jasveer and those around him for a few hours. Now, it was September 12, 2013, and Varka had been in England for about a month. On that night, smoke began billowing from Jasveer and Varka's house, alarming their neighbors. To investigate the source of the smoke, 2 or 3 neighbors visited Jasveer's house. When they rang the doorbell, Jasveer initially didn't respond. However, when he eventually opened the door, One of the neighbors asked what was causing the smoke and smell of burning flesh in his house so late at night. In reality, no human cremation had taken place at the crematorium that day. In response, Jasvier explained that they had cleaned their house that day, accumulated some garbage, and were just burning it in the furnace, which might have been causing the smell. Hearing this, the neighbors went back to their homes, but after some time, a very strong smell started emanating again from Jasvier's house. Because of this, it became difficult for the neighbors to breathe, so one of them called the police to complain. A few minutes later, the police arrived at Jasvier's house, responding to reports from neighbors about a strange smell emanating from the residence. Jasvier provided the same evasive answers to the police's inquiries as he had to his neighbors. The police then conducted a search of Jasvier's house, discovering a 22-inch furnace in which he was burning household trash. Following their inspection, the police departed, but Jasvier subsequently went to the police station to file a complaint against his wife. In his statement, he alleged that Varka had deceived him, marrying him only to secure a pathway to England from India. According to Jasvier, the two had argued that morning, and in the evening, Varka had taken $500 and left his house. After hearing Jasvier's story, the police assured him that they would find Varka soon. Following up on his complaint, Jasvier returned home and promptly called his parents in India, recounting the entire ordeal. By the next morning, Jasvier's parents had also informed Varka's family about Varka's actions. However, on the morning of September 13th, Jasvier again burned the pot inside his house. Smoke billowed out, accompanied by a peculiar and pungent smell. This time, the neighbors found the situation utterly bizarre, prompting them to call the police once more. When the police arrived at Jasvier's house that morning, they told him that his neighbors were distressed due to his actions. The overpowering smell compelled the police to investigate its source, and they attempted to enter Jasvier's house. Without hesitation, Jasvier guided the police to his garden. The police conducted a thorough search of the entire garden, but yielded nothing. Just as they were about to leave Jasvier's house, a female officer spotted a furnace nearby, still burning with a flickering flame inside. As she removed the lid, she let out a blood-curdling scream, prompting the other officers to converge on the furnace. Inside, the officer had discovered a charred human body, the skin completely incinerated, leaving only skeletal remains. The police wasted no time in arresting Jasvier. A team of forensic experts was subsequently summoned to the scene. The severely burned body made it challenging for even the forensic pathologist to determine its gender. However, a few personal items were recovered from the furnace, including a bracelet, necklace, and ring. Following a meticulous forensic examination of the entire house, the police sequestered some of Jasvier's personal belongings, including his phone, iPad, and notably a wedding album featuring Varka and Jasvier. After meticulous scrutiny of the photos, the police made a startling discovery. Varka was wearing the same jewelry later found in the furnace by the forensic team. This revelation sparked a crucial question: did the remains belong to Varka? With these suspicions in mind, the police turned their attention to Jasvier, grilling him about his wife's whereabouts. Initially, Jasvier feigned ignorance, claiming Varka had deceived him and fled. But when confronted with the incriminating evidence gathered by forensic experts, he became visibly agitated. His story promptly shifted as he attempted to spin a new narrative for the police. Jasvier and Varka got married in March 2013, but he was initially hesitant. He was won over by her charm, and they had a grand celebration. A few months later, Varka moved to England, but then confessed she had only married him to gain independence and move. Jasvier was furious, and their arguments escalated, including a nasty fight on September 12th. Later, when Varka failed to return home at night, Jasvier's worry turned to alarm, prompting him to file a complaint at the police station. However, the police were skeptical of Jasvier's story. They subsequently questioned Jasvier's neighbors and friends, who described Varka as friendly, polite, and well-liked, while Jasvir's friends reluctantly shared disturbing details about his preference for men over women. Undeterred, Jasvir continued to fabricate stories to mislead the police. However, their investigation uncovered incriminating photos on Jasvir's iPad, which revealed a telling aspect of his personality. The police then intensified their interrogation, and Jasvir eventually cracked under the pressure, recounting a vastly different story. Jasvir confessed to the police that he had a violent fight with Varka on September 12th, during which he lost control and choked her with a vacuum cleaner pipe, resulting in her tragic death. He then transported her body to the garden, where a furnace was located, and burned it. However, this wasn't Jasvir's true story. In reality, Jasvir had known he was gay and attracted to men since he was 12. After completing his education in India, he moved to England, where he landed a job at a bank. In 2008, he began a relationship with a gay man and had also confided in some close friends about his sexual orientation. In 2013, Jasvir's family began pressuring him to get married soon. Unwilling to reveal his true identity to his family, Jasvir agreed to marry Varka. After bringing Varka to England, their relationship remained platonic. However, when Varka discovered inappropriate pictures of Jasvir with his gay partner on his iPad, their disagreements turned into arguments, with Varka threatening to expose Jasvir's secret to his family. Jasvir was consumed by rage when he strangled Varka, ultimately leading to her death. In an attempt to dispose of her body, he burned her in the furnace, but the pungent smell of burning flesh alerted the neighbors, who promptly notified the authorities. On the morning of September 13th, Jasvir returned to the furnace, only to find that some remains were still intact, prompting him to douse the body with petrol and set it ablaze once more. However, the putrid smell spread again, and when the police arrived at Jasvir's doorstep for the second time, they apprehended him as the husband who had murdered his new bride upon her discovery of his sexual orientation. Jasvir, a native of Warsaw, brutally killed Varka Rani just a few months into their marriage. The news sent shockwaves through both Jasvir's and Varka's families. Jasvir's family struggled to come to terms with their son's sexuality, while Varka's family was consumed by grief. The evidence against Jasvir was overwhelming, and he was subsequently taken into custody and brought to trial at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Although Jasvir initially attempted to denial and deceive to avoid punishment, he was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment after a grueling 3-month trial. Furthermore, he would be ineligible for parole for at least 20 years. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star Daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, But an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his traumatic experience. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kat West. The case of Kat West, Kat Dawn West. Martin was born on February 15, 1975, in Davie, Florida. She grew up as an only child in a humble and modest family environment with parents Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat longed for a sibling, but her mother's health issues prevented that from happening. Instead, she became extremely attached to dolls, treating them like they were alive, singing to them, and carrying them around in school. Kat was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, actively participating in sports and dance. However, during her teenage years, she began to show signs of bipolar disorder, which included depression and anxiety, followed by periods of extreme happiness and restlessness. Unfortunately, her parents didn't realize what was happening until later. By that time, Kat had started using alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she received treatment for alcoholism that the underlying cause of her problems was discovered. In her 20s, Kat overcame her addiction to alcohol, but managing her bipolar disorder was more difficult. She had to take several strong medications that interacted with each other and caused side effects. Eventually, her disorder was brought under control, but she had to continue taking medication for the rest of her life. Sadly, her life was cut short. Kat dreamed of a traditional life with a husband, children, and a family, but her personal struggles with a psychological disorder and alcohol issues made it challenging. Despite these difficulties, she was a popular and lively person who loved being the center of attention. Kat had aspirations to become a model and would attend castings, trying out different looks. Her idol was Marilyn Monroe, whom she admired greatly. She watched Monroe's movies repeatedly, collected posters, and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat bore a resemblance to Monroe, which she happily exploited and treasured. Although Kat never became a famous model, her photos regularly appeared in local magazines, earning her some recognition and a small following. People would occasionally recognize her on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she finally met the man she would start a family with, William West. William Jeffrey West, who goes by his middle name Jeffrey, was born in 1970 in Alabama, where he grew up in an ordinary family. As a child, Jeffrey envisioned a future in the military or law enforcement. He was an excellent student, enthusiastic about sports, and physically fit. In the early 1990s, Jeffrey enlisted in the U.S. military, starting as a military police officer. His commitment led him to become a recruiter, responsible for recruiting new members into the Army and Navy. He eventually became the head of a recruitment division. Throughout his life, Jeffrey dedicated 20 years to serving in the military. William balanced his military career with higher education, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina, and later a master's degree in criminal justice and disaster and emergency management. He was intelligent, composed, and goal-oriented, yet modest and somewhat introverted, preferring quiet gatherings to loud parties and shunning the spotlight. After marrying young, he became a devoted family man and responsible parent to 2 children. After retiring from the military, William joined the police department of a university town as a corporal, tasked with ensuring campus safety. He took his duties seriously and responsibly, although he never had to use his issued service firearm throughout his career. Kat and Jeffrey, an unlikely couple, met in the mid-2000s. At the time, Jeffrey was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their differences, Jeffrey being a stern, quiet military man and Kat being a flamboyant, bold attention seeker, they felt an instant attraction. Their differences, including their 5-year age gap, Jeffrey's existing marriage, and Kat's struggles with alcoholism, did not deter their relationship. Jeffrey filed for divorce shortly after meeting Kat, and in a whirlwind romance, they got married in a Las Vegas chapel just 5 months later in 2005. They had a daughter, Lola, and settled in Sarah, Alabama, Jeffrey's hometown, in a cozy custom-built home designed by Kat herself. The bedroom was a shrine to her idol, Marilyn Monroe, with numerous portraits adorning the walls. Despite their vastly different personalities, the Wests were known to their neighbors as a happy couple. Kat, who preferred to be called Caitlin, was a fashionista who reveled in attention. She took great care in her appearance, always donning bold makeup, stylish hair, and fashionable outfits that drew admiration. She beamed with joy, perpetually smiling, and thrived on compliments. In stark contrast, Jeffrey appeared reserved, serious, and disciplined, traits likely shaped by his lengthy military career, and often seemed overshadowed by Kat's vibrant personality. Kat struggled to succeed as a model after getting married and having a daughter. Instead, she focused on being a homemaker, but she felt unfulfilled and craved attention. With the rise of social media, Kat started posting photos online, initially harmless pictures inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe. Over time, her posts became more provocative. Sources close to the couple say that Kat's husband didn't object to her new hobby and even helped her by taking photos. This turned into a profitable venture for Kat through paid subscriptions. The couple was seen buying seafood dishes, fine wine, and candles to set a romantic mood, captured on surveillance cameras. They appeared happy and carefree, joking and smiling, with no sign of the tragedy to come. After dinner, Kat, who had previously struggled with alcohol dependence, became her online persona, Kitty Cat, under the influence of the drinks. She asked her husband Jeff to take sultry photos, first in lingerie and then nude. Jeff agreed and took several revealing shots which were posted on Kat's private profile for fans only. By around 1 p.m., what was supposed to be a romantic evening escalated into a tragic nightmare. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Wests headed to work. Although the sun hadn't risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Wests' house. At first, she wasn't sure what she was seeing, but as she slowed down, she realized with horror that an almost fully naked woman was lying motionless on the road. A woman witnessed someone standing on the doorstep of a house, but they vanished when they saw her. She couldn't determine if they entered the house or fled down the street. She was startled and uncertain, so she didn't approach the body right away. Instead, she went home, informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report their discovery. At the operator's request, the family returned to the scene and examined the body. They identified it as Mrs. West, but unfortunately there was no pulse. Her body was cold, and rigor mortis had set in. Mrs. West's body lay face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a pink bra top. A blood-stained pool had formed beneath her head, and a bottle of absinthe with bloodstains was nearby. Her damaged smartphone lay a short distance away. Since the area was quiet and residential, there were no other witnesses that night. This left a mystery about what happened between 8:30 p.m., when the West's car was last seen, and 5 a.m., when the body was discovered. The only person who might know what happened is Mr. West, but is he hiding something? Detective Michael Melhoff was one of the first to arrive at the scene of the crime. He went to the house where her body was found and spoke to the man who answered the door. The man appeared anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When the detective asked him where his wife was, the man said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then asked the man to step outside, where he told him that her body had been found nearby, identified by neighbors as Kat West. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective, confirming that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't rush to the body or show any signs of distress. When questioned about his actions the previous night, the man said he had slept soundly after a night of drinking. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also mentioned that his wife had bipolar disorder and struggled with alcoholism, which sometimes led to erratic behavior. He said that she would occasionally use their backyard trampoline, sometimes injuring herself when she missed it. A search of the house found no signs of a struggle or violence, but it did reveal evidence of a night of drinking, with 2 plates of leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle on the kitchen table. The police found Jeffrey's wife's high heels under the table and her matching underwear on the floor, but some suspicious items caught their attention: blood-stained napkins in the trash and an open bottle of cleaner. Jeffrey was arrested as the main suspect that day. He told investigators that he and his wife Kat had a tumultuous evening. After a photo shoot, Jeffrey wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He left to take a shower and returned to find Kat still sitting at the table, drinking straight from the bottle and texting on her phone. This infuriated Jeffrey, and he asked her to put the phone away, but she refused. When he tried to take it from her, they had a small struggle, during which he accidentally elbowed her face, causing a few drops of blood to appear from her nose. Jeffrey claimed that this was the blood the police found on the napkins. He said he eventually took the phone from Kat and threw it out the door into the darkness. Then, he went to bed, thinking Kat would soon calm down and join him. He allegedly had no idea what happened next until the police knocked on his door, asking about Kat. Mr. West proposed several theories to explain his wife's disappearance and death. One possibility was that she went outside to find her phone, taking the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. In this scenario, she might have fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and frozen to death. Alternatively, someone might have attacked her. Mr. West also found it puzzling that his wife was not wearing the bottom part of her pink lingerie set, and that she had gone outside in just a bra, without putting on any outerwear that was readily available near the entrance. He attributed these unusual actions to her being intoxicated from alcohol. The suspect's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and suspicious omissions. He claimed to be too drunk to recall certain details, leaving investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events. Although there were no witnesses, the evidence suggested that the 42-year-old woman died from a blow to the head, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, which was compounded by hypothermia. The autopsy revealed that the victim's blood alcohol level was extremely high, indicating severe intoxication that would have impaired her coordination and increased her risk of losing consciousness. At first, the evidence seemed to support a simple explanation. The heavily intoxicated victim had gone outside to look for her phone, taking the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. She likely lost her balance, fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and died from her injuries and exposure. However, the investigation found this scenario too convenient and suspiciously staged. Although the bottle with blood traces was found next to the victim's head and her smartphone was nearby, forensic analysis cast doubt on the idea that she had fallen and hit her head by herself. If that were the case, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, not remained alongside it. Kat's and her husband Jeff's fingerprints were found on a bottle, along with some unidentifiable smudged prints. The presence of blood-stained napkins and an opened bottle of household cleaner in the house led investigators to conclude that the couple had a violent argument. According to the theory presented in court, Kat's obsession with her online subscribers sparked the fight. In a fit of rage, Jeff allegedly struck Kat with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to make it look like an accidental fall by cleaning up the blood, but he failed to dispose of the evidence. The fitness app on Jeff's phone supported this theory, as it showed he was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived, contradicting his claim of being asleep. The police believed Jeff was trying to conceal evidence during these periods. A neighbor who discovered Kat's body remembered seeing a male figure on the doorstep who quickly left in an unknown direction in the early morning darkness. However, she couldn't confirm whether it was Jeff or someone else, nor could she say whether the person entered the house or not. The investigators were intrigued by the online presence of the deceased, who had many male admirers paying to see her revealing photos as Kitty Cat. This led them to consider the possibility of an obsessed follower among her subscribers, someone who might have tried to track her down for a personal encounter. The victim, a middle-aged homemaker, regularly received messages from men, some of which were inappropriate. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment. A few persistent fans from other states with solid alibis were quickly cleared as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep that didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, leaving their origin unknown. Jeffrey West's neighbors, friends, and family described the couple as happy and content, with Jeffrey aware of his wife Kat's online activities, which he viewed as harmless. However, their social circle was unaware of Kat's online persona, Kitty Cat, just as most of her followers didn't know her real identity. When asked if he had ever been violent towards Kat, Jeffrey denied it, saying he loved her too much to harm her. Despite this, the couple frequently argued, including a heated exchange on January 12th, in which Kat questioned their compatibility due to their differing personalities. Although Jeffrey remained the prime suspect based on forensic evidence and circumstantial details, his family, including his parents, daughter, and in-laws, were convinced of his innocence, adamant that he could never harm Kat. Jeffrey West was arrested and unable to post the $500,000 bail, so he remained in custody for nearly 3 years until his trial. During this time, he was offered a plea deal, which would have reduced his sentence if he admitted to killing his wife. However, he refused the deal, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, received significant media attention due to Kat's online fame. This publicity put a lot of pressure on the judges and jurors. By this point, the possibility of someone else being involved in Kat's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence pointed to Jeffrey West as the killer. They believed that in a fit of jealousy and while under the influence of alcohol, he hit his wife with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In a panic, they suggested that he then staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. Jeffrey's defense team, on the other hand, argued that Kat's death was indeed an accident. They cited her extremely high blood alcohol levels, which they believed affected her balance and coordination. Kat's mother gave a heartfelt testimony in support of her son-in-law, describing her daughter as eccentric, but emphasizing that Jeffrey loved her deeply and would never harm her. She also asked the court to consider the well-being of their granddaughter, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father as well. After deliberating, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter on January 11, 2021. Jeffrey received the maximum sentence of 13 years, including time served. It's worth noting that if he had accepted the initial plea deal, he might have already been released from prison. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegan. Jared Bridegan was born in 1989 in Florida to a modest family as the second of 2 sons. He and his older brother Adam were close from a young age and grew up together. Their parents were devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met Mallory Bowden at church, and they developed a romantic relationship. She would later call him her first true love. However, their religious beliefs discouraged cohabitation before marriage, so when Jared graduated from high school in 2007, they went their separate ways. He moved to Utah to attend college. In 2009, at the age of 20, Jared met his future first wife, Shannon Gardner, at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older than him and came from a wealthy family. Shannon Gardner was born in 1987 to Starling and Shelley Gardner, founders of Stampin' Up!, a successful company that produced and sold craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated $100 million in annual revenue. Shannon's sister, Sarah, holds a management position in the company. As a member of a wealthy family, Shannon grew up with luxuries and never had to work as a chef, despite being trained in the profession. After meeting her partner, they got engaged just a few months later and married in a lavish ceremony in Salt Lake City in early 2010, with her family covering all expenses. Their religious beliefs, which discouraged cohabitation and long engagements, influenced their quick decision to marry. After the wedding, they settled in Utah, where Shannon's parents helped them buy a comfortable home worth around $1 million. They, Shannon and Jared, traveled extensively, sharing their luxurious lifestyle on social media. They received significant financial support from Shannon's parents, who gave them around $10,000 monthly and allowed them to use their accounts freely. After Jared graduated, his in-laws gave him $100,000 to start his own business. In 2013, they had twins, Abigail and Liam, and initially moved to Connecticut. However, when Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues, they relocated to Florida, following doctors' advice that the sea air would be beneficial for his health. They bought a comfortable 2-story home near the coast in Ponte Vedra Beach. Shannon managed a popular blog, presenting herself as a devoted wife, caring mother, chef, and fitness enthusiast who loved travel and sports. She regularly visited the gym, prompting Jared to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. After moving, their marriage began to fall apart, and they soon found themselves in the midst of a scandalous divorce. Despite their efforts to put on a brave face, it was clear that their relationship was troubled. One of the main sources of tension was their differing levels of commitment to their religion. Shannon had grown disillusioned with their faith and stopped attending church, while her husband remained a devout follower. This disparity led to arguments, misunderstandings, and ultimately to the breakdown of their marriage. Shannon grew unhappy with Jared, feeling he was lazy, had gained weight, and wasn't putting enough effort into his business despite taking online courses. However, Jared eventually got a job at Microsoft and worked his way up to a senior manager role. Despite this success, the couple grew apart and started arguing frequently. Things took a turn for the worse when Jared found out about intimate messages between Shannon and her personal fitness trainer. Although Shannon denied having an affair, the trainer admitted to it in a conversation with Jared. Jared then reached out to Meller Bowden, saying his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her trainer, but he was willing to forgive her and save their family for the sake of their children. In 2015, after almost 6 years of marriage, the couple started a bitter and dramatic divorce process. They fought over their shared assets and custody rights for their children, with Jared accusing Shannon of infidelity, which she denied, saying the marriage had simply lost its spark. Shannon retaliated by accusing Jared of being cruel and offensive. Shannon and Jared disagreed on how to divide their assets, including their home, cars, and bank accounts. Shannon claimed that most of what they had was given to her by her parents or purchased with their money, since Jared had only recently started working. Jared argued that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home. The couple also disputed custody of their twins. Shannon accused Jared of trying to manipulate the children against her when he spent time with them, allegedly coaching them on what to say about her and recording their statements to use in court. In response, Jared accused Shannon of invading his privacy by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements with a GPS device in his car. Shannon sought full custody of the children and ownership of their seaside home. She claimed Jared threatened to use their children's trust funds for himself. Jared countered by accusing Shannon of tax evasion, alleging that she worked off the books at her parents' company and received large sums of money. After their divorce, Jared and Shannon continued to argue in court for nearly 7 years, despite having shared custody of their children. During this time, they both started new families and had more kids. Jared met Christina, a co-worker at Microsoft, in 2016. At first, their relationship was professional, but they eventually became romantically involved. Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared, and they got married in the fall of 2017. They had their first child, a daughter named Bexley, in February 2019, and their son London was born in August 2021. Shanana got married again in 2018 to Mario Fernandez, a real estate businessman who is 1 year younger than her. They had a son named Michael that same year. The family lived in the same house where Shanana used to live with her first husband, Jared, which was a point of contention during their court battles. Despite the new families, the conflicts between Jared and Shanana did not subside, and they continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared wanted to restrict Mario's access to the twins when Shanana was not around, while he wanted his new wife, Christina, to play a bigger role in raising his older children. The last court hearing between Jared and Shanana, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was extremely tense. They made more accusations against each other and fought over their property rights. Shanana claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's more comfortable vehicle to transport the children because he was more concerned with embarrassing her than with their convenience and safety. After the court granted Shanana exclusive rights to the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation, they established a routine for their children's care. As part of this agreement, Jared picked up their twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, which often included their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after having her baby, London, she prioritized spending time with him and avoided leaving him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed this routine, taking the children to Coastal Cafe after picking them up. After dinner and a walk, he dropped the twins back at their mother's house and headed home, taking his usual 40-minute route. This route included a stretch of road without streetlights that was quite deserted. As he drove cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter sleeping in her car seat, he encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. when the sun had set. Suddenly, in the headlights, he spotted a tire lying in his lane. Jared stopped his car to move a tire that was in the road, so he turned on his hazard lights and got out of the vehicle. That's when someone started shooting at him. The attacker was very close and shot Jared multiple times with deadly accuracy before running away. Luckily, the child who was sleeping in the car was not hurt. A person who was nearby heard the shots and carefully approached the scene. They found Jared lying on the ground, bleeding badly. They immediately called the police and ambulance, but unfortunately, it was too late to save Jared. Christina, Jared's wife, had spoken to him just minutes before the attack. He told her he had just dropped off their kids and would be home in about 15 minutes. But when 30 minutes passed, then an hour, and Jared didn't come home, Christina started to worry. She tried calling him again, but this time a police officer answered and told her what had happened. The officer asked Christina to come to the police station in Jacksonville Beach right away. The investigation at the scene revealed that a tire on the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. After getting out to remove the tire, he was shot. Fortunately, his 3-year-old daughter, who was sleeping in the car, was unharmed, suggesting she was not the shooter's target. The absence of stolen valuables, including a wallet with cash, phone, and tablet, ruled out robbery as a motive. When questioned about potential enemies, Christina mentioned Jared's first wife, Shannon, but declined to make accusations without solid evidence. Unfortunately, there was no surveillance footage due to the lack of cameras in the area. A witness reported hearing the shots, which broke the night's silence, followed by the sound of a vehicle speeding away, although nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's hint that Shauna might be involved in the crime seemed reasonable at first, but detectives doubted she was directly responsible, given her strong alibi. She was at home with her husband, their twins, younger son, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. Instead, the police focused on reviewing nearby surveillance footage. The cameras showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and reappearing a few minutes after the witness reported the shots. The police asked the public for help in identifying the suspicious vehicle. Jared's family made TV appeals, urging anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. The first suspect was arrested, but Shauna and her current husband Mario repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder when questioned by detectives. Shauna openly admitted that her relationship with her ex-husband was complex, but insisted she would never wish harm on the father of her children. In media interviews, she shared how her 9-year-old twins reacted to the news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. It's notable that neither Jared's ex-spouse nor his older children attended his funeral. This was because Christina had made it clear to Shanana that she was not welcome at the ceremony, and Shanana had countered that if she couldn't attend, the twins wouldn't go to the burial either. Almost a year after Mr. Brand's murder, the first suspect was finally arrested in January 2023. The police had been secretive about their investigation, only disclosing that it required significant resources and effort. However, their persistence paid off when the dark blue Ford F-150 was involved in an accident and fled the scene before the police arrived. This breakthrough led to an arrest. The police chief and city prosecutor announced that 62-year-old Henry Tienon, an unemployed man with a criminal record, had been charged with several crimes, including second-degree premeditated murder, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush that obstructed the victim. Tienon, hoping to receive a lighter sentence, agreed to cooperate with law enforcement and provide information about the crime. As a result, the criminal partnership began to fall apart, and news soon spread that Tienon had been renting a house with a friend owned by Mario Fernandez. After Tienon pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario, Mario was arrested. There were rumors that Shanana, Mario's wife and Tienon's former lover, was the mastermind behind the murder, allegedly motivated by her long-standing dislike for her then-husband. Despite strongly denying all accusations, Shanana eventually left town, relocating to Washington with her 3 children, just a few months after her husband's arrest. Shanana Gardner Fernandez was arrested on August 17, 2023, at her Washington apartment on the same charges as her current husband. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial with her co-defendants. Her alleged motive was to avoid sharing custody of her 2 children with her ex-husband and to gain control of disputed assets due to complicated relationships. The legal case is ongoing, and all defendants are currently facing legal proceedings. Shanana's husband, Tienon, has pleaded guilty to all charges and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. He is likely to face a minimum of 15 years in prison, which may be equivalent to a life sentence given his age. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but is refusing to testify against his wife, exercising his legal rights. Shanana Gardner Fernandez, however, denies all charges against her. Despite this, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. Shanna's children are being taken care of by their grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Esmeralda Richiez. Esmeralda Richiez Martinez was born on August 23, 2006, in La Alta Gracia, Dominican Republic, to restaurant owners Alio Rosti and Isabel Martinez. She grew up in a happy and close-knit family with an older sister, and the two were extremely friendly. As Esmeralda grew older, she blossomed into a bright and beautiful young woman. She was passionate about singing, dancing, and showcasing her artistic talents on social media. In her senior year of high school in 2023, Esmeralda, also known as Marala, was a popular and cheerful student who was surrounded by friends. One of her close friends was 35-year-old John Kelly Martinez, a new teacher at her school. John Kelly had recently entered the public education system after passing a competitive teacher's exam and was undergoing a one-year probationary period. He quickly won over his students with his friendly approach, treating them like peers and organizing regular outings outside of school. John, a married teacher and father of two, prioritized his students over his family. He spent most of his free time with them, building trust and relationships. Esmeralda was one of these bright and beautiful students. On the evening of February 12, 2023, John met with his female students, including Esmeralda, outside of school. He picked her up last and introduced himself as her teacher, promising to drive her home afterward. They joined two other men and two female students, and John drove them to the beach in his car. Everyone except John and Esmeralda got out of the car when they arrived. The two of them spent some time alone before joining the others. They drank a few beers and took a short walk along the beach. However, their evening was cut short when Esmeralda suddenly fell ill and started bleeding. They had to rush her back home. The next morning, her parents found her dead. The autopsy revealed that she was murdered, leaving her parents with unanswered questions. The National Institute of Forensic Medicine initially concluded that Esmeralda Ritchie's death was caused by a severe internal bleeding and hemorrhagic shock resulting from a perennial laceration. However, following a thorough autopsy, the final classification of her death was undetermined. What led to such a tragic event when Esmeralda was accompanied by friends and a supervising teacher? The investigation shed light on the events. Police interviews with Esmeralda's friends and a review of their phones revealed crucial clues, leading to the identification of a suspect. One of Esmeralda's friends, who had been with the teacher and Esmeralda that evening, provided a shocking testimony. She claimed to have seen the professor secretly add 5 pills to Esmeralda's drink while they were at the beach. The initial police findings sparked widespread speculation in the Dominican Republic, where abortion is illegal. Many theories emerged about the cause of Esmeralda's death, with some believing she died of a heart attack, and others speculating that she bled to death due to abortion pills allegedly given to her by John Kelly. The medical examiner's report was expected to put an end to rumors and speculation. However, when the forensic examination results were released, speculation only ceased for a brief moment. Esmeralda's relatives were shocked and skeptical when they learned the results, which ruled out pregnancy. The family was unhappy with the report's conclusion because it contradicted their theory, which was supported by the investigation's findings and evidence. Previously, an examination of Esmeralda's friends' phones had uncovered numerous text messages hinting at the teacher's long-standing interest in the student, but these clues were indirect. After a failed pregnancy, an investigation found that John Kelly drugged a girl without her consent and violently assaulted her on the beach, causing severe blood loss. A few hours later, Esmeralda, died. Toxicology test results were still pending. Based on the evidence, the prosecutor's office requested that John Kelly Martinez and his alleged accomplice, Ruben Murillo Martinez, be detained, as they are the main suspects in Esmeralda's death. As a result, John Kelly Martinez was suspended from his teaching position for 90 days without pay due to the evidence against him. The prosecutor's office also requested that John Kelly be held in preventive detention for a year as the primary suspect in Esmeralda's death. To clarify, preventive detention is not a punishment for a crime, but rather a measure to prevent the person from committing further crimes while the investigation continues. New investigations, including fresh episodes and eyewitness interviews, have deepened the mystery surrounding the student's tragic death. Despite multiple stops during the journey to tend to her severe bleeding, neither the individuals assisting her nor the entire company took the crucial step of calling emergency services or rushing her to the hospital. Several stops made by the defendants were captured on surveillance cameras. Witnesses reported that they purchased alcohol and that Esmeralda and John went to the restroom together. They also visited a pharmacy to buy medication, water, and feminine hygiene products. It was later discovered that Esmeralda had to change her clothes completely at one of the stops because they were soaked in blood. After Esmeralda was dropped off at home, her parents noticed she was bleeding heavily. Assuming it was related to her menstrual cycle, her mother gave her a painkiller to help her fall asleep. One of Esmeralda's cell phones revealed that she had sent an audio message to a friend in the early morning hours, pleading for help and saying, "Please help me, I'm bleeding." Unfortunately, the friend didn't hear the message until it was too late. The next day, Esmeralda was found unresponsive on her bathroom floor, covered in blood. On February 14th, John Kelly Martinez was arrested, and his home was searched the following day. The clothes he wore on the night in question were seized during the search. Additionally, his cousin, Ruben Murillo, was accused of trying to hide John's bloody pants. The investigation into the event has been plagued by ambiguities. Rather than fueling speculation, the prosecutor's office should have provided clarity on the circumstances surrounding the young girl's death, which had alarmed the public and sparked demands for a thorough and high-quality investigation. Many people felt that the investigation had missed crucial evidence, including a thorough search of the teacher's home and car, which were potential crime scenes. The authorities quickly requested to examine the car, but John Kelly's wife sold it soon after, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide evidence. The car's new owner was Panaga Pillar. Only when the authorities threatened to take action against J.C. Espinal Rowe, John Kelly's wife, and Frank Panaga for their alleged involvement in the case did they finally inspect the car. Although they found traces of Esmeralda's blood, no other significant evidence was discovered. The court decided that there was not enough evidence to keep J.C. Espinal Rowe in jail, so she was released. The investigation continued for several months. The prosecutor reopened the case, re-interviewing the three girls who had been with Esmeralda that night. Their testimony helped investigators piece together the events of that night, minute by minute. At 7:30 p.m., John Kelly Martinez, 35, and his cousin Ruben Murillo Martinez went to Esmeralda's home in La Otra Banda Igay with the three girls in the passenger compartment of the car. John, posing as Esmeralda's teacher, coaxed her away from her mother, promising an exciting evening with her classmates. Initially, the plan was to take the group to an amusement park, but John changed his mind en route and chose a new destination. It's likely that John had no intention of going to the amusement park and instead opted for a quiet evening at Mile Beach. During the drive, John stopped at a store to buy a beer and asked his brother to move to the back seat, allowing Esmeralda to sit in the front. John had a thermos with him, which he filled with beer and secretly added 5 unknown pills. He offered the drink to Esmeralda without warning her about the pills, but one of her friends noticed this when they arrived at the beach. The three girls left the car, leaving Esmeralda alone with John. They spent about 30 minutes alone in the car, which didn't go unnoticed by Esmeralda's friends. Suddenly, John emerged and instructed everyone to get back in the car, claiming they needed to leave urgently. During their journey, they had to make multiple stops due to Esmeralda's heavy bleeding. One of these stops occurred at 9:45 when they pulled into a gas station parking lot. There, Esmeralda visited the restroom in the cafeteria, as confirmed by eyewitness accounts and CCTV footage. Esmeralda's classmate reported that she asked to stop at a gas station because she needed to use the restroom. When Esmeralda went in with her friends, they were shocked to see that her clothes were covered in blood. The restroom was also heavily blood-stained, requiring they to mop the floor. They were frightened and asked the gas station attendant if this was normal, and she told them it was not and that they needed to take Esmeralda to the doctor right away. They told John Kelly, Esmeralda's teacher, about the situation, but he refused to take her to the hospital, fearing he would be arrested. An investigation later confirmed that Esmeralda's blood was found in the parking lot and restroom at the gas station. Surveillance footage and a receipt also showed that they had stopped at a pharmacy to buy medical supplies, including sanitary pads, at 10:21 p.m. John Kelly eventually dropped Esmeralda off at her home around 11 p.m., but she was still heavily bleeding, having been left alone in the car with him. A subsequent medical report on February 16th revealed that Esmeralda had suffered severe and brutal abuse, resulting in massive blood loss and hypovolemic shock. While this condition could have been treated, Esmeralda never received the life-saving medical attention she needed that night. Esmeralda's toxicology report revealed the presence of a synthetic gestagen, a key ingredient in abortion pills. However, it had already been established that Esmeralda was not pregnant. This substance is taken orally as a contraceptive and works by suppressing ovulation and fertilization. Given its presence in her body, it's likely that John Kelly, her teacher, had planned to engage in intimate relations with her. After a series of medical examinations, Esmeralda's body was finally laid to rest at the Albano Public Cemetery. Her family and friends, including Malala, bid her a sad farewell, remembering her as a kind and cheerful person. Her devastated parents couldn't help but replay the fateful evening in their minds, blaming themselves for trusting John Kelly with their daughter's care and allowing her to go for a walk with him. On June 4, 2023, prosecutors charged John Kelly Martinez, a math and physical education teacher, in connection with the death of Esmeralda Richiez after reconstructing the last hours of her life. 8 days later, on June 12, 2023, the LA Alagia Prosecutor's Office filed an indictment and requested a trial against Martinez and his cousin, Rubiel Milo Martinez, in the LA Alagracia Instructional Court. The trial was initially scheduled for August 23, 2023, but was postponed due to Storm Franklin and rescheduled for November 24, 2023. However, the judge later ordered that John Kelly Martinez be retried as the sole defendant in Esmeralda Richiez's death. The new trial was initially set to begin on January 9, 2024, but was rescheduled again because only half of the witnesses showed up. The trial is now scheduled to take place on February 1st and 6th, 2024, before the Collegiate Court of the Penitentiary Chamber of First Instance of La Altagracia. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on the idea that the victim's parents were responsible for her death, rather than focusing on the actions of the defendant. The prosecution, on the other hand, presented a significant amount of evidence, including witness statements, expert testimonies, and physical evidence, to build a strong case against the defendant. During the trial, the defendant attempted to portray himself as a victim, claiming that his interactions with the victim on the night of her death were consensual. When Professor John Kelly Martinez brought Esmeralda home, she was alive and in good health. However, the court documents reveal that Martinez voluntarily inflicted severe injuries on Esmeralda, including lacerations, abrasions, and contusions, which ultimately led to her death due to acute internal and external bleeding and hemorrhagic shock, as confirmed by the autopsy report. Despite Martinez's statement in court, it had no impact on the judges or the audience. On March 14, 2024, Martinez, 36, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for violent conduct. He will serve his sentence at the Anamuya Correctional and Rehabilitation Center. Additionally, Rubiel Maro Martinez, the defendant's cousin and an accessory after the fact, was given a conditional enforcement measure requiring him to make regular court appearances in Hayward. Following the enforcement measures against Martinez and his cousin, the family's attorney, Raimundo Rosario, expressed satisfaction with the outcome and stated that the family would not pursue further investigation. Esmeralda's mother, Isabel Martinez, regretfully recalled allowing her daughter to walk with the teacher and 3 friends. She had previously spoken to the teacher on the phone, asking if he was a teacher, and he had confirmed that he was. She had trusted him to take care of her daughter, not knowing that he was a danger to her. The Ministry of Education offered support to the families of the deceased girl and the other girls who were with her on the day of the tragedy. They expressed hope that such cases would not happen again in the education community or in society. For the grieving parents, their fight for justice had just begun. A fun evening outing that included a beach visit had turned into a night of terror, resulting in the tragic death of Esmeralda Richiez, who suffered fatal injuries at the hands of the man entrusted with the care of children. Everyone involved in the evening's events bears some responsibility for what happened. Marala, however, was too afraid to confide in her parents due to their extreme strictness. We've all been there, afraid to speak up because we fear punishment or being misunderstood. But in this tragic case, fear triumphed, resulting in the devastating loss of a precious life. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carol Maltese. Carol Nicole Maltese was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy. She was the only child of Fabio and Josephine and had a mix of Italian and Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents got divorced, and she stayed with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, got remarried, and had more children. Carol's mother, Josephine, chose to stay in Italy and raise her daughter on her own. Despite her former husband's lack of support, Josephine worked multiple jobs to give Carol a good education and a better life. Carol grew up to be a kind, sociable, and beautiful girl with many friends. She was active in sports, particularly horseback riding, and loved to dance. She was fluent in 3 languages, enjoyed traveling across Europe, reading, and could talk about almost any subject. As a teenager, Carol became a stunning beauty with a slim figure, and she loved being the center of attention. After finishing school, Carol went on to study industrial design, arts, and fashion at a technical university. She quickly became one of the top students in her class. Carol began dating a young man, a year older, and studying architecture and design during her freshman year. When she was 20, she discovered she was pregnant, which came as a shock to both her and the father. Despite being unprepared, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol gave birth to a son, and she and the father were forced to drop out of school due to financial constraints. They moved to Verona for better job opportunities to support their family. Carol landed a job as a sales consultant at a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son turned 1, while her partner worked from home and took care of their child. In mid-2019, Carol started an affair with Angelo, secretly meeting him in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. However, just before the new year, the father of her child discovered her infidelity and ended their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best to leave since she was already planning to move in with her new boyfriend. However, a complication came up. Angelo still lived with his parents, and it wasn't possible for Carol to move in there with her child from a previous relationship. So, they made the decision to rent a place together instead. When the economic crisis hit, they lost their jobs and couldn't afford their apartment. Carol moved in with her new boyfriend's parents and made the difficult decision to leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father until things got better and she could bring him to live with her. As the economic crisis worsened, a self-isolation regime was put in place, and everyone was forced to stay at home. Carol struggled financially during this time and relied on Angelo and his parents for support, unable to contribute financially to her son's care. To make matters worse, Carol's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive therapy. With no other options, Carol desperately sought ways to earn money from home to support her son and ill mother. She turned to social media and YouTube, sharing her experiences of living in isolation and the challenges she faced in an effort to generate an income during the lockdown. Carol's early blog posts didn't gain much traction, but her attractive appearance caught readers' attention. She received flattering comments as well as some inappropriate proposals. One subscriber suggested she join OnlyFans, a platform where her looks would be in high demand, and she could quickly become a star and earn a lot of money. Taking this advice, Carol created an account under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting provocative photos and short videos. She quickly gained a large following of paying customers. While Carol's earnings increased, she kept her new career a secret from her boyfriend and close family members. As time passed, Carol's content became more explicit and sophisticated as she worked to satisfy her fans. She herself found enjoyment in this line of work. However, Carol was able to keep her secret hidden for only about 6 months before someone she knew discovered her account. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone knew how she was making a living. Carol's friends and family in Italy didn't understand her decision to work in the adult film industry. They saw it as immoral and were embarrassed to be associated with her. Carol, on the other hand, was confident that her work was a form of art that could bring her success, wealth, and fame. As she became more popular, adult film studios and directors approached her with offers to star in their films, which she accepted. She started participating in group shoots and public performances, but her boyfriend Angelo was still in the dark, thinking she was working remotely as a designer. However, when Angelo finally found out the truth, he was shocked and unsure of what to do. But when his parents discovered Carol's profession, they demanded that he break up with her immediately, fearing that she would bring shame to their family. Carol's OnlyFans account had become extremely successful, earning her enough money to rent her own place and attracting offers from directors. Her fees continued to rise, and she professed in interviews that this was not a long-term career goal. Instead, she planned to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. For now, she was enjoying her work and was well compensated. Despite her success, Carol frequently spoke about the constant moral pressure she faced from others. Their judgments and attempts to shame her led to feelings of anxiety and guilt. However, she defended her work as a form of art and believed that every woman should have the freedom to choose her profession without fear of judgment. Carol started anew in Rescaldina, Milan province, leaving her adult film career behind and working as a sales consultant at a perfume boutique. However, this fresh start was short-lived. She met David Fontana, a 42-year-old banker and nude photographer online. He was seeking a model, and Carol responded, feeling an instant attraction during their first meeting. Despite being married, Fontana pursued a relationship with Carol, and they began dating, combining photo shoots with intimacy. Fontana learned about Carol's past and encouraged her to return to filmmaking, recognizing her talent. He had complex feelings for her, loving and possessive, yet also enjoying seeing her in adult films. After divorcing his wife in March 2021, Fontana moved in with Carol, and they explored their explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating popular content on OnlyFans, taking a share of the profits from their joint ventures. Carol's success in the adult film industry led to her receiving lucrative contract offers from foreign directors and studios. However, her boyfriend Fontana became jealous and reacted angrily when others showed interest in her. Months later, Angelo, who was still in love with Carol, reached out to her and confessed his feelings. He proposed that they get back together, promising not to interfere with her work. Carol was touched by his words but revealed that she was already in a relationship with someone else, David. Despite this, Carol and Angelo continued to stay in touch. However, when David found out about their communication, he became furious and threatened Angelo. He even went as far as setting Angelo's car on fire. Angelo reported the threats and property damage to the police, and a restraining order was issued against David. However, there was no evidence to link David to the arson, so he didn't have to pay for the damages. As Carol's popularity grew, she traveled frequently for shoots and gained over 30,000 followers. She was saving money to buy a home, take her son with her, and eventually leave the adult film industry to focus on raising him and finding a new job. Meanwhile, she started creating custom videos, which became a profitable venture. Carol received scripts from fans who paid her to bring their fantasies to life. She continued to work with Fontana on filming and editing, and they shared the profits and lived together. In September 2021, she met Salvatore Galdo, an actor, on a film set, and they started working together on explicit films. As they worked together, Carol and Galdo developed real feelings for each other, and they began a romantic relationship in secret, afraid of how David, her current partner, might react. She waited for the right moment to tell David everything and end their relationship. A few months later, Galdo proposed to Carol with an engagement ring, and she happily accepted. By the end of the year, she had saved enough money to buy her own home. Carol planned to take her son, Mary, with her and decided it was time to talk to Fontana about her decision. Fontana took the news surprisingly well, understanding that Carol was moving on to her new partner. However, they still had unfinished projects that they had already been paid for, so they agreed to complete the work and then go their separate ways. Carol's sudden and mysterious disappearance in 2022, similar to Carol's earlier vanishing act, left everyone stunned. She abruptly stopped acting in films, discontinued her online streams, and ceased communication with colleagues. Moreover, she refused to accept new project offers from directors. Although many people were aware that Carol had planned to leave the entertainment industry, her complete disappearance still came as a surprise. Carol's friends and husband, Salvatore, grew concerned when she stopped responding to their calls. Despite her reassurances via social media, they sensed something was amiss. Months passed, and Carol's occasional social media posts revealed she'd gone on a seaside vacation without telling anyone. Her brief, curt responses only added to their unease. On March 20, 2022, a passerby discovered large black trash bags near a rocky cliff in the Italian community of Borno. Upon approach, the passerby found human fingers poking through the torn polyethylene. He immediately reported the gruesome find to the police, who discovered 4 bags containing a human body divided into 18 parts. The remains were so disfigured that identification seemed impossible. Forensic experts determined the young woman had died at least 2 months prior, but the cause of death remained unknown. It was clear the body had been stored in a freezer before being dumped, likely to keep it hidden. The criminal had removed distinctive features, tattoos, and skin pieces, then burned, cut, and doused the skin in acid to conceal the tattoos. Despite this, investigators pieced together tattoo fragments and matched them to a missing persons database. A news report about the body led a woman from the adult film industry to recognize the tattoos as belonging to a missing colleague, Charlotte. This information allowed law enforcement to identify Carol, who had become engaged to her coworker, Salvatore Galdo, before her disappearance. What's curious is that he didn't report her missing. Salvatore became the prime suspect, but his distraught reaction and conversation history with Carol seemed genuine. However, his story didn't add up, leading to another suspect, David, being questioned. David showed up at the police station to report Carol missing, oblivious to the recent discovery. His nervous, contradictory story eventually led to his confession. He had accidentally killed Carol. David Fontana claimed to be filming a scenario for a client who had paid a large sum of money. The script involved binding a woman, taping her mouth shut, covering her head with a bag, and brutally beating her with various tools, including a hammer. David was supposed to pretend to inflict severe pain without actually harming her. However, he allegedly went too far and struck her with a hammer, fracturing her skull. Instead of calling for help, he ended her suffering with another blow. Panicked, he dismembered the body and stored it in his freezer for over 2 months before deciding to dispose of it. The investigation revealed that David was the mysterious client who had orchestrated the entire scenario to exact revenge on the woman, Carol, who had decided to leave him. During the torture session, he extracted her phone password, which was supposedly part of the script. On January 11th, David fatally struck Carol with a hammer, and used her credit card to buy a freezer, saw, and axe to dismember her body. He disfigured the body to prevent identification and stored the parts in the freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he communicated with Carol's relatives and friends on her behalf, creating the illusion that she was alive. By the end of March, David decided to dispose of the body by dumping it off a cliff. However, the remains were discovered 2 days later, and authorities tracked him down within a week. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed that he loved Carol and had taken her life unintentionally. Despite his claims, the court found David guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 30 years in prison, ordering him to pay compensation to Carol's son, mother, and the father of her child. Surprisingly, the dismemberment of the body was not considered an aggravating factor, making David potentially eligible for parole. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner, and they became inseparable after he invited her to prom. While their love was palpable, their significant age difference raised concerns. Despite this, their parents did not intervene in their relationship. As time passed, the Roden and Wagner families grew close, often spending weekends and attending parties together. The young couple's love was carefree and passionate. When Hannah turned 15, she revealed her pregnancy, which thrilled Jake. He expected his family to be delighted with the news, as they valued tradition and family lineage. The Wagners saw the baby as a way to continue their family name, which was passed down through generations. In contrast, the Rodens had a more modest approach to family, but still prioritized their children. Hannah's parents, Christopher and Dana, remained devoted to their 3 kids despite their divorce. The Roden family's income was modest, unlike the Wagners. To celebrate Sophie's birthday, a grand party was organized shortly after. Jake proposed that Hannah move in with him and his family, claiming it would make life easier for both of them. However, Hannah refused, having come to realize that Jake was trying to control her and limit her independence. This was partly due to Jake's increasing aggression and suspicious behavior, which had already led to physical altercations on several occasions. Hannah's rejection sparked tension between the Wagners, with each of Sophie's parents determined to gain full custody of Sophie. Driven by their own interests, the families began to advocate for their own rights. Jake's anger towards Hannah peaked when she refused to sign a document granting him and his brother full custody. He even threatened her, accusing her of hiding secrets. The situation escalated when Hannah announced her second pregnancy. Although she claimed the child was fathered by another man, Jake was skeptical. In December 2015, he hacked into Hannah's social media accounts to uncover evidence of infidelity, but found none. Instead, he discovered her communication with Georgia Ford's former mother-in-law, which sparked his interest. A court case was soon to follow as a result. During a court hearing to decide where their granddaughter Sophie would live, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III got into a serious argument. This dispute marked the beginning of the end for the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon became convinced that Hannah, Sophie's mother, was an obstacle and that they needed to eliminate her and the entire Roden family, who could potentially gain custody of Sophie. This disturbing idea evolved into a sinister plan by Christmas 2016. While many people were celebrating the festive season with love and kindness, the Wagners held a chilling family vote to decide whether to carry out their plan. Every family member agreed to go ahead, and they began assigning roles and making preparations. Over the next 5 months, they secretly observed the Roden homes, studying their daily routines, work schedules, and surveillance cameras. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III visited Christopher Roden under the guise of offering him a job to improve his finances. This was just a ruse to get into the house. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Christopher Roden Sr. answered the door, unaware of the danger lurking. Earlier that day, Bobby Joe Manley, Dana Roden's sister, had stopped by Christopher's trailer to care for the family's animals, as she did daily since he had offered her a job. However, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual at that time of day. Alarmed, she called emergency services, reporting what she saw and requesting help at 477 Union Hill Road. Panicked, Bobby rushed to the neighboring homes of relatives, loudly knocking on their doors. At one of the homes, she found a 3-year-old boy, Clarence's son, who didn't respond to her questions about his parents' whereabouts, only pointing towards the bed. Following the incident, the surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear, and the police advised the Roden relatives to take precautions and warned all Pike residents to stay indoors at night. After a brutal mass murder shocked the state, the public demanded a swift and transparent investigation, urging authorities to catch the perpetrators as soon as possible. In response, businessman Jeff Ruby offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. However, he later withdrew the offer. An investigative task force of at least 100 individuals was formed to work on the case. Following the funerals, investigators took possession of the slain family's 3 trailers and several vehicles, transporting them to a secure facility to preserve evidence and protect the victims' belongings. The plan was to return the family's cars and farming equipment to their relatives after the investigation. Forensic experts joined the inquiry, meticulously examining the trailers, but no suspect DNA was found. Although cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, they had been disabled, leaving no useful footage. The perpetrators had clearly planned every detail carefully. Just when it seemed like there were no significant leads, detectives made a breakthrough discovery. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes. In one location, police found around 200 cannabis plants, leading them to suspect the drugs were being grown for sale, not personal use. This raised questions about potential involvement with Mexican drug traffickers, but the amount of cannabis found was too small to imply involvement with an entire cartel. A relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking in January 2017, but this was considered a coincidence. Leonard Manley, the father of Dana Roden, denied his daughter's involvement in the cannabis operation, saying that they were trying to drag Dana through the mud, and he didn't like it. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale operation. The theory that a family feud over illegally obtained money was behind the murders was also disproven. At the Rodens' property, authorities discovered not only banned substances, but also specialized equipment used for breeding fighting chickens and cages containing animals trained for combat. Although these findings initially led investigators to suspect illegal animal fights might be connected to the homicide, it soon became apparent that this was not the case. Despite months of investigation, the true motive behind the crime remained a mystery. By April 13, 2017, local authorities officially announced that they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, prosecutor Rob Young insisted that the investigation was still active, implying that they had some promising leads that they were not yet ready to reveal. As the second anniversary of the mass crime approached, the case received little attention from the local media, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attended the memorial service, leading the community to suspect that the investigation had stalled. On May 12, 2017, a surprising turn of events occurred when a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, just 10 miles from the scene of the crime. Initially, they were looking for suspects, but it was later revealed that their true intention was to gather evidence. Additionally, detectives searched a house in Adams County that had previously belonged to Jake Wagner, although he had already sold it by that time. Approximately a month later, on June 20, 2017, the focus of the investigation officially shifted towards the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims, were under scrutiny. The Wagners had moved to Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area, claiming to have loved the Roden family and stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior, it wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving Jake had hacked into Hannah's account during the examination of the Wagner family's devices. Search queries related to guardianship were discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased sneakers for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime. The tread pattern of one of these matched that found in one of the trailers. Officers believed Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executive. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons, who were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a document related to Sophie's guardianship. She struck a plea deal to avoid imprisonment. The charges against Frida Wagner were later dropped in June 2019. The other Wagners refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any involvement in the Rodens' deaths, expressing sorrow and wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. However, in April 2021, 5 years after the incident, Jake Wagner decided to make a deal with the prosecution. Under the agreement, he would provide details of the crime in exchange for life sentences for all family members instead of the death penalty. Jake Wagner Jr. admitted to killing 5 people and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including aggravated murder, burglary, conspiracy, and other crimes. To ensure his daughter Hannah wouldn't be taken away, he thought killing her mother was the only solution. He believed that if he didn't also kill the Rodens, they would seek revenge and fight for custody of Hannah. Angela, who had been involved in the conspiracy, pleaded guilty to several charges on September 10th, including conspiracy, robbery, and evidence tampering. In exchange for her cooperation, the charge of murder was dropped. She received a 30-year prison sentence. George Wagner IV went on trial on August 28, 2022. Despite denying any involvement in the crimes, claiming he was unaware of what was happening, the prosecution presented evidence of his role in planning, executing, and covering up the crimes. He was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Wagner III's trial is set for February 2024. Despite his family members being convicted, he still maintains his innocence, but likely faces the same fate as his son. The once peaceful relationship between the Wagners and Rodens ended in tragedy, driven by a collective and incomprehensible madness. The consequences of their actions left 3 children without parents. As Sophie grows up, she will one day realize what happened, and it's hard to imagine how she will cope with that knowledge. The Wagners' bitter custody battle had a devastating impact on her, denying her the love and support of her parents, relatives, and a stable upbringing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where he received his education. At 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. He was stationed at a base near Marquette, where he met Terry, a young teacher from Iron River. They became friends, bonding over their shared values and interests. Their friendship grew into a close relationship, but Christopher's military service didn't allow for a romantic relationship. When he left the military, he moved to Traverse City, but the distance didn't weaken their bond. In 2012, Christopher proposed a long-distance romantic relationship, and Terry agreed. They shared many common interests, including a love of nature and a desire for a peaceful lifestyle. They decided to live together in Iron River, where Christopher found a job at a factory. However, after 2 years, their passion faded and they parted ways amicably. Christopher moved out and began looking for a new place to live. He found a job in Asheville, North Carolina, and started a new chapter in his life. On October 14th, he told Terry he had taken the day off and suggested they meet up the next day for a walk. However, he failed to contact her the next day, and Terry became worried. After trying to reach him for several days, Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The police reassured her that people sometimes disappear and then return, but Terry was concerned. At the police station, Terry told investigators that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina and might have started a new life, cutting ties with his past. However, to avoid speculation, a detailed investigation was launched. The police identified the company where Christopher had started working and contacted an employee, but surprisingly, no information about Christopher could be obtained, as he hadn't shown up to work in 10 days. Search efforts were then focused on the local woods, where Christopher often took solo trips with specially trained dogs deployed to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of him was found. Terry suggested searching Christopher's former apartment to rule out any accidents or potential clues to his whereabouts. Upon entering the apartment, detectives found it in disarray, with items scattered across the floor and open closets. Although it initially seemed like Christopher was simply a messy person, Terry knew him to be more organized. The detectives began to suspect that the disarray might be related to a crime. After inspecting the apartment, they decided to expand the search area. They eventually found Christopher's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Inside the car, they found ordinary clothes and a piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. The route had no specific address, but detailed notes described the path, including turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry explained that Christopher, despite living in Iron River, wasn't familiar with the street names, so he wrote down directions in this way. The detectives followed the route, which led them to a house in a neighboring town. Upon knocking on the door, they met Jason Cochran, an overweight man, and his wife Kelly. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and found a piece of paper with their address in his abandoned car. Kelly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they were friends. Although Kelly hadn't been in contact with Christopher recently, she had tried to reach him via text messages in mid-October. She assumed he had started his new job in North Carolina and didn't respond. Kelly also mentioned Christopher's health issues, which might have led him to start anew. The investigators were puzzled by the route leading to the Cochran home and why it was in Christopher's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple cooperated with the investigation. After further questioning, the detectives left the Cochran home and proceeded to interview Christopher's co-workers at the factory. There, they discovered that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which had been rumored for months. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance sparked a new lead when Kelly Cochran made a surprising statement. Investigators decided to re-question Kelly and her husband Jason to get to the bottom of their relationship. Kelly eventually admitted to having an affair with Christopher, but initially withheld the information because of her husband's presence. Kelly claimed that she and Jason had an open relationship and Jason was okay with her infidelity. However, Christopher's co-workers disputed this, saying that Jason did not approve of the affair and that the Cochran family did not have an open relationship. When Jason was questioned, he revealed that he was strongly opposed to his wife's infidelity, making him a suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigators couldn't conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. Kelly and Jason were released from the police station, and the investigation continued for 5 months without a breakthrough. A new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden, took over the case and began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together after graduation. Despite their personality differences, they got married and started a swimming pool maintenance business. Jason handled most of the work, but the physical demands took a toll on his health, leaving him with back problems. When Jason's condition worsened, Kelly took over the business. During this time, Kelly sought ways to help her husband recover, including finding a medicinal plant that could help alleviate his back pain. However, the plant was banned in their state, so they moved to Michigan in 2014 to access it. In Michigan, Kelly and Jason got jobs at the same plant where Christopher worked. Kelly and Christopher became close friends, which was important to him given his relationship troubles with Terry. The prosecutors eventually obtained a search warrant for the Cochrans' home, but the search yielded no evidence linking them to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant find was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym inspired by video games. The title of the book caught their attention, but its content was disturbing. The book described violent murder scenes targeting everyone who had ever wronged Jason. The detectives read it thoroughly and found a character that matched Christopher's profile exactly. This strengthened their suspicions about Jason, making them wonder if he wasn't making up the crimes, but instead drawing inspiration from real events he had committed. 3 weeks later, the police decided to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to find evidence they might have missed the first time. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty and the family had moved to Indiana. This made the investigators anxious, as they feared they might not find the crucial evidence they had been searching for months, particularly DNA samples from the suspects. Michigan police contacted their Indiana counterparts to help collect DNA samples from the Cochrans. The Indiana police officers went to the Cochrans' new home, and Jason and Kelly did not object to the procedure, as there was no concrete evidence linking them to the murder. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Kelly called the police, frantic, saying her husband Jason was unresponsive. When the rescue team arrived, they found Kelly in a panic, trying to obstruct the doctors. Jason was sitting in a chair, his face severely burned as if from extreme overheating. The doctors confirmed his death, and the body was sent for forensic examination. During the search of the Cochrans' new home, an officer discovered a syringe needle near the bed. The forensic report revealed that Jason's death was not due to drug abuse, as initially suspected, but rather strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. This discovery turned Jason, the prime suspect in Christopher's kidnapping, into a victim himself. The investigation became even more complex, and forensic experts shifted their focus to Kelly Cochran, who now became the prime suspect in both Christopher's disappearance and her husband's murder. Kelly was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly if she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to her husband or was involved in his death. However, despite the pressure, Kelly did not confess to either crime. Months later, the investigators still lacked concrete evidence to prove Kelly's guilt and justify an arrest. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who insisted that illegal drugs could not have caused Jason's death, as he knew his friend well and would have been informed about any changes in his life. Jason had been using medicinal herbs to alleviate his chronic back pain. However, his friend Walter noticed a significant change in his behavior around March last year. Jason confided in Walter about the mounting pressure from the Iron River police, who suspected him and his wife Kelly of involvement in a man's disappearance. The ordeal had taken a toll on Jason, leaving him depressed and even suicidal, which required intensive treatment. Walter observed that Kelly had begun to exert more control over Jason's life, making him increasingly anxious and withdrawn. Jason would avoid social gatherings when Kelly was around, and their video game sessions had become a thing of the past. These observations proved crucial in the investigation, helping detectives understand the dynamics within the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason's death was by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to lure Kelly into a trap. The plan involved using Walter as bait to prompt Kelly into making a mistake. Walter agreed to play along, and on March 12, 2016, he called Kelly under police surveillance. He pretended that Jason had given him a letter containing vital information, which Kelly was supposed to send to the police if anything happened to Jason. However, Kelly suddenly told Walter to drop the idea, catching both him and the police off guard. Despite this, detectives still lacked concrete evidence, and Kelly continued to deny her involvement during subsequent interrogations. On April 26, 2016, Kelly seemingly evaded the authorities, prompting a federal manhunt. Walter, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and fearful that Kelly might evade justice and potentially target him. The police eventually tracked Kelly's phone to the West Coast, and on April 28th, they arrested her at her cousin's home in Wingo, Kentucky. Once in custody, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher Rain, revealing that she had wanted to leave her husband and start a new life with him. However, when Jason discovered her infidelity, their situation escalated, and Kelly was bound by a pact they had made on their wedding night, obliging her to kill her lover if her cheating was exposed. Kelly Cochran claimed she never intended to follow through on an agreement she made with her husband, Jason, but he was determined to see it through. The agreement was a threat to kill Christopher Rain, Kelly's lover, if she didn't end the affair. Kelly didn't want to do it, but she ultimately helped Jason commit the crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house while her husband was away. Kelly offered him dinner and intimacy, and they went upstairs to the bedroom. However, Jason suddenly appeared, panicked and holding a rifle. Without hesitation, he shot Christopher in the head, killing him instantly. Under Jason's direction, Kelly helped dismember Christopher's body using a hacksaw, detaching his limbs and head from his torso. They placed the remains in trash bags and dumped them in the woods near Crystal Falls. They also drove Christopher's car away from the house to avoid suspicion and thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. Kelly later confessed to her role in the crime, saying she wanted revenge against Jason for forcing her to end her affair with Christopher. She was deeply in love with Christopher and felt Jason had deprived her of happiness. Months later, on February 22, 2016, Kelly killed Jason by suffocating him after giving him a lethal dose of medication. She then helped the police find Christopher's remains, which were buried in the woods near Crystal Falls. A team of investigators and a canine unit searched the area and eventually found a human skull with a bullet hole, confirming it was Christopher's severed head. A .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses likely belonging to Reagan were found at the scene. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains, finally solving the 2-year-old missing person case. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind both crimes and that her motive was rage and jealousy. Christopher viewed their relationship as casual, but Kelly genuinely loved him and wanted a future together. When Christopher refused to commit, Kelly decided to kill him, making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession in court. However, Kelly claimed she was being abused by her jealous husband, who had planned and committed the crime. She said he hid in the basement, caught the lovers off guard, and then shot Christopher in a rage. Kelly claimed Jason suggested dismembering the body and coerced her into helping by threatening to kill her. This version raised doubts about Kelly's guilt, but the jury still found her guilty of premeditated murder. Kelly was sentenced to life without parole. Jason Cochran's case was settled with a plea agreement, and Kelly received an additional 65 years in prison. Kelly was sent to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Michigan, where she is serving her sentence and regrets that her personal life didn't work out. In a phone interview, Kelly said, "I tried to do what I thought was right. I got married." She also shared, "It was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work while my husband played computer games." In prison, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes, claiming she and Jason committed more crimes and that Christopher was just one of their many victims. However, Kelly's claims are difficult to verify, and there is no concrete evidence to support them. Her brother has also heard similar claims, but there is no evidence to back them up. Detective Jeremy Ogden is investigating the details, hoping to find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paige Bergfeld. After high school, Paige attended the University of Florida's nursing school, where she met Howard Bigler. They started dating after realizing their mutual feelings for each other. After graduating with a nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado to live with her family. In 1995, she and Howard got married. At first, they seemed like a happy couple, sharing many common interests and views. However, they had a significant disagreement that eventually led to their divorce. Paige wanted to have a child and start a family, but Howard didn't share her desire. This issue caused frequent arguments and discussions, but they couldn't find a compromise. In 1997, they decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained friends due to their strong connection. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but that marriage also ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Paige reconnected with Howard. He claimed to be one of the last people to see her alive. On the 28th, Howard and Paige, who were previously married, met in Eagle County, Colorado, to attend to personal matters. They spent Thursday together, after which they returned to their separate homes. Following their meeting, they continued to stay in touch through phone calls. Later, when Paige went missing, Howard quickly reached out to emergency services to report his concerns. During the call, he expressed his deep worry and belief that something terrible might have happened to her. Howard mentioned that Paige was a devoted mother who would never abandon her children without a valid reason. A recording of the call confirmed this, and cell tower data verified that Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area on the day Paige disappeared, which is a significant distance from where she was last seen. This evidence led the police to rule Howard out as a suspect. The investigation then focused on Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and uncovered several suspicious incidents that required further investigation. Paige had previously reported her husband Rob to the police twice for harassment during their marriage. Before marrying Rob, Paige worked at a strip club in Denver, where she met him. Rob came from a wealthy family and had inherited a significant fortune. The two fell in love and got married in 1998. The couple settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige realized her dream of becoming a mother. Within a few years, they had 3 children who became the center of Paige's life. The early years of their marriage seemed happy, with the couple enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. However, things took a turn for the worse due to Rob's financial difficulties. Rob's family businesses faced severe issues, leading to a significant decline in their economic situation. As a result, Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy, which triggered a deep family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated to the point where Paige called emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but when the police arrived, they claimed to have resolved their issues. A year later, Paige reported Rob for assaulting her while she was holding their youngest child. Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and he avoided jail time. The couple's relationship continued to deteriorate, leading them to separate. Rob then moved to Pennsylvania. During the investigation into Paige's disappearance, Rob was interviewed to establish his alibi for that day. He claimed to have been at home and could not have harmed her. The investigators could not find any evidence to implicate Rob in her disappearance. In fact, Rob actively participated in the search for Paige. The investigating officers left no stone unturned in their effort to find clues and solve the mystery of the missing mother. The investigation into Paige's disappearance began with a thorough examination of her car. It was hoped that evidence in the car could help locate her or provide clues about what had happened. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department noted that arson is often used to destroy evidence, but in this case, the examination of the vehicle yielded valuable information. The driver's seat was found to be pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the car was a tall individual, inconsistent with Paige's short stature. The trunk of the car contained Paige's notebook, with pages torn out from June 26 to June 29. As time passed, the search for Paige became increasingly urgent. A break in the case came when a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town to fix a flat tire and discovered a checkbook lying nearby. He reported it to the authorities, who then searched the area and found additional items belonging to Paige, including medical records and insurance cards. Sergeant Weiler's investigation into Paige Bergfeld's disappearance took a dramatic turn when he found a business card on the road, leading him to a shocking discovery. Paige was secretly working as an escort under the alias Carrie. This revelation completely upended the investigation, as it revealed a side of Paige's life that her loved ones knew nothing about. Previously, it was believed that Paige was a devoted mother who worked hard to provide for her children after her divorce. She had started her own children's clothing business, taught dance lessons, and sold kitchen supplies. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for her children and was actively involved in their school activities. However, the discovery of the secret phone Paige used for her escort work revealed a completely different picture. This phone became a crucial piece of evidence, leading police to unravel a complex mystery that was far more sinister than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation into Paige's disappearance led to more questions than answers. What prompted a responsible mother and successful businesswoman to lead a secret life? And how was this double life connected to her vanishing? These questions took center stage in the investigation, adding a new layer of mystery. To get to the bottom of things, detectives analyzed Paige's cell phone, found in her car, and examined her contacts and calls from the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call made from her phone was on June 28th around 9 p.m. This analysis led investigators to identify 7 suspects, one of whom was Lester Ralph Jones. Jones's criminal record raised red flags, particularly his history of violence against women and a previous kidnapping conviction that earned him a 5-year prison sentence. However, it wasn't the only concerning aspect. Jones's white car matched the description of the vehicle seen by Carol, Paige's friend. Carol shared a crucial detail with detectives. Paige had once approached her car, only to find a white car blocking her driveway. Enraged, Paige got behind the wheel to turn around, but the cars collided. The unknown driver quickly fled the scene. Investigators suspected that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and was stalking her after discovering that he had tried to book an appointment with her for intimate services on the day before she vanished. When questioned, Lester denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, a search of his home turned up several incriminating items, including a prepaid phone, wigs, Viagra, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The prepaid phone caught the investigators' attention due to suspicious calls made to Paige's phone on the day she disappeared. Lester initially denied owning a second phone, which proved to be a lie. Using the phone's packaging found at his home, police traced the purchase to a supermarket on North Avenue. The store's security footage showed Lester buying the phone, which he refused to acknowledge when confronted with the evidence. Lester Jones became the main suspect in Page's disappearance, but the police couldn't find enough concrete evidence to charge him. They continued to investigate and search for Page's body, hoping to find proof of his guilt. However, the case stalled for several years, leaving Page's family and loved ones in a state of unbearable grief. As time passed, the search seemed increasingly futile, and the hope of finding Page alive began to fade. In 2012, a hiker stumbled upon human remains in a ravine in Delta County, surprisingly close to where Page's personal belongings had been found 5 years prior. Investigators were nearly certain the body was that of a young mother, and DNA testing confirmed it was indeed Page. Unfortunately, her story ended in tragedy. The condition of the body made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but it was clear she had suffered a brutal beating with multiple broken bones, particularly in her face. It was concluded that her injuries ultimately led to her death. The discovery of Page's body added a horrific layer to the story. It's believed that her body was buried, but years of soil erosion eventually brought it to the surface, which may explain why it wasn't found sooner. The discovery led to a breakthrough in Lester Ralph Jones's case, which had stalled for years. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. The trial finally began in July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors claimed that Lester's frustration over being unable to see Page, combined with his history of violence against women, motivated the crime. The prosecution's key witness, Lester's ex-wife Lisa, testified about his violent past. She described how Lester kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s after she ended their relationship. On one occasion, he attacked her and her partner, shooting the latter in the head. A month later, Lester made another threat, warning her that she would be thrown into a lake. Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police, leading to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. In contrast, Lester's defense attorneys argued that the police had wrongly accused an innocent man and suggested that other clients of Page's may have had motives for the crime. However, they failed to provide convincing evidence linking anyone else to the murder. Lester's current wife testified, stating that although her husband used an escort service, her faith prevented her from leaving him. Nevertheless, she could not provide an alibi for him and identified him in a supermarket surveillance video where he bought a disposable phone. Lester's first trial ended in a mistrial on September 9, 2016, when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and continued to investigate and re-examine the evidence. After several weeks, on November 21, 2016, the jury finally reached a verdict, finding Lester guilty of all charges related to Page's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lester's defense team appealed the sentence, but an appeals court panel upheld the conviction and sentence in June 2022. Page's funeral was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary remembered her as a beautiful and radiant woman with a smile that lit up the room. Her tragic death has had a lasting impact on her family and friends, leaving her 3 children without their loving mother and support. The tragic case of Page captured the nation's attention and spanned many years, but through the unwavering dedication of law enforcement relatives, justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, ensuring he can no longer harm innocent people. Page's courageous story stands as a powerful reminder of the significance of persisting in the pursuit of justice, no matter how long and arduous the journey may be. Her memory will forever be cherished by those who knew and loved her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had two siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burks was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at a Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Noonan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren.